Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Where It All Began. I'm so excited to be talking with today's guest, Matt Simpkins. Matt and I worked closely together when he came back to his alma mater, Ohio Northern University, and directed our production of The Addams Family. Had to rep my merchandise today. Like I said, Matt is a graduate of Ohio Northern University. He has worked in the professional theater industry for several years now. He does photography, headshots, filmography, choreography, directing. He does so much, and I cannot wait to talk with him. So let's get into it and talk with Matt to find out where it all began. Hi, how are you?
Hi, CJ. I'm good. I'm good.
I'm so happy that you're here. So you and I worked together at Ohio Northern University, where you also went to
Mhm.
college.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm hoping that, through this podcast to not only be an inspiration, but to provide avenues for people, like you had said, to hear about the roots of, people that supported the kid version of you, and how that shaped who you are today. So hopefully, through this, those kind of behind the scenes people can get a shout out and, feel the love from
Mm.
from you. So if you're ready, I'd love to jump right in and start interrogating you.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Go for it.
Um, so obviously, like we had said, we're both from Ohio. So what was it
Right.
like growing up in Ohio, liking theater? Was it an early connection that you had with theater when you were a kid?
Yeah. Wait. Remind me where you're from in Ohio. What part?
So I'm from Findlay, so just like 30
Oh,
minutes away
right.
from Ohio
From
Northern.
Northern. Yeah.
And
Okay.
you're like
So
the
I'm
other
from,
side, right?
yeah, I'm from a town called Ravenna, which is right next to Kent, where Kent State
Okay.
University is. So basically, I grew up um, 30 minutes from Akron and then about 45 minutes from Cleveland. So kind of that Northeast Ohio area. Um, and my family moved to Ravenna when I was 5 years old. I was born in outside of Pittsburgh, and we moved to Ohio because my father was a marine biologist, and he got a job running the educational department at SeaWorld of Ohio. Because back in the
Right, right.
90s, there used to be a SeaWorld. Shamu lived in
Yep.
Aurora, Ohio. Um, so I grew up around marine life, um, and my dad ran the educational department there for I think 14 years before it closed. Um, but when my family moved there, one of the first things that my parents did, because they wanted to get involved in community and they wanted to get involved in meeting people and not feeling like strangers on the block that
hmm
much. They found a local community theater. And my dad had always kind of sung in church and enjoyed performance, and so they found a local community theater. Streetsboro Community Theater was the name of it, and we as a whole family just kind of got involved. My first ever production when I don't even remember how old I was. I guess I would have been 6 or 7. Was Sound of Music, and
Okay.
at this community theater, and I believe my dad was in it. He was one of the Nazi uh, soldiers, but my dad was in it. My mom worked in costumes. My brother's 2 years younger than me. He was a little bit too young, but he would be running around those hallways and
Yeah.
eventually join in with some other community theater productions. So then that was it. That was kind of the I remember this is a vivid, it's kind of a core memory I have of when, people always ask like when did the bug bite you?
Right.
Um the bug bit me, and I remember it as I was hiding behind the styrofoam tombstones at the end of Act Two. And I remember, we're in like a high school gymnasium doing community theater. This would have been I don't need to date myself, but this would have been this would have been way before iPhones, and I remember hiding behind there with my fellow castmates, the other kids, and just thinking, this is so cool. This is so dangerous. This is so exciting. We're
Mm-hmm.
telling this story, and there's like, I remember feeling the tension in the air of the moment of the scene, the way the audience was
Yeah.
feeling, what we were trying to communicate, and feeling that, we're in this smelly old gymnasium, but yet we all had been
Yeah.
transformed and transplanted into this emotional
Mm-hmm.
moment, right? And that, I think that emotional moment was, I remember that more than say like thinking I was actually
Right.
in the Alps hiding
Right.
behind at an abbey. Like it was that emotional connection that I felt amongst in
Yeah.
that moment, not to belabor. So that was when the bug bit me, and then it was just
Yeah.
nonstop from there. Community theater, a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of community theaters. I started taking dance at a very early age. I was already like, playing musical instruments and in band and in choir. So like that foundation was already there, and I started dancing because the head of the woman that did most of the directing choreographing at that community theater, she also taught dance, and she was like, you should really like, you kind of have a knack for it, so maybe you should start, like,
Yeah.
I'll teach you, blah blah blah. But then yeah, and then carried on through dance, community theater, and then so this was kind of the introduction for me, or kind of my window into the professional world, was that, and this was again like we were talking earlier before we started about how like all these roots from your childhood kind of like linger up, and shape and form who you are. My journey was that when we moved to Ravenna, Ohio, in Ravenna, there was a very well-known union dinner theater called the Carousel Dinner Theater, which was in Ravenna, Ohio, until the year we moved to Ravenna, Ohio. And then it moved to Akron, Ohio. It moved into a bigger space and
Yeah.
whatnot. But the community all knew of it because it was like, there were the big fancy national tours that would come in through Cleveland or through
Mm-hmm.
EJ Thomas Hall in Akron. But um, that was where you went and saw like the professionals from New York, because
Yeah.
this is all pre like non-union
Right.
tours and
Right.
pre non-union dinner theater. So but this was a full union dinner theater. Um, and so I started as a kid, as a child actor, started working there. And what I mean, I can't remember how it worked with the union then and what contract it was, but like I remember a lot of the kids were, there came a time like after my fourth show there or something, I was going to have to join the union. And because I had worked, too many weeks as a kid.
Yeah.
But I remember working there. I did and I would like leave school. I would leave. I remember like all my friends were jealous because I would leave. I'd leave school at like 11 o'clock on Wednesdays, and my mom would drive me. Bless my parents. They really loved
Yeah.
this lifestyle and they supported it. They would drive me to Akron, Ohio, like 30 minutes, and to do a matinee. They'd sit in the car, and then we'd go eat some lunch, or I would do my homework in between shows with the other kids that were there, and then do an evening show, and then drive home. Like it was a lot. It was 8 shows a week
Yeah.
but it was my introduction to um, understanding the union world, professional theater, really understanding what a PSM is, what an ASM is,
Right.
what wardrobe departments were, what dressers were, what fittings were, and I was learning this all, I think my first show there, I was probably like 8 or 9. Um, and, and then I did 4 shows there. So that was, and then I was meeting a lot of industry professionals, a lot of
Yeah.
Broadway stars, and because at that time it was a very very popular place to go and work. They were long contracts. It
Mm-hmm.
paid well, and it was the country's largest dinner theater. So it's not there anymore. It's closed. I think the 2008 um, stock crash kind of closed it, but I think I could be wrong. I'm sorry, anyone listening. Um, Sean Sarconi, who I think ran it there at the end. But
Mm-hmm.
anyhow, so that was kind of that was it. That's how the bug bit
Yeah.
me. I was surrounded by not only like doing community theater and community and making, kind of my circle of friends that way. And then through dance, I studied at, the local dance school,
Yeah.
Lisa School of Dance in Streetsboro. I think they're still in Streetsboro, but they're still around. And then I also studied at the Akron School of Ballet,
Okay.
just for a little more formal ballet training. And um, yeah, so I was kind of doing it all. I was doing school theater, middle school, high school. Had some really influential um, theater theater people in middle school and high school that, especially middle school. I remember there was a teacher. His name was Mr. Hughes, Rick Hughes. Um, adore him, and he was a huge influence in. He loved musical theater. He knew a lot about musical theater, and I did Your Good Man Charlie Brown with him in middle school, and yeah, it felt comfortable. It was a place I loved. Um, being at that time in my life, like around those
Yeah.
people and doing that thing, and that was it. But yeah, it was multi-layered. It was the school theater, community theater, and then professional theater,
Right.
at a very young age. So it was kind of, I was getting to scratch the itch in three different worlds.
Yeah.
Um, but what it did is it informed me. There was no, like, when I decided I wanted to go to school for it, there was never a question. Like, I already understood
Yeah.
it. I knew
Yeah.
I knew it. I kind of knew what to expect. I'd heard all the nightmares. As
Right.
a 14-year-old, I was watching people bawl when the show was coming down at the carousel because they didn't have another job lined up, and were
Right.
going back to New York, or they lost their sublet, or they, like, all those life things that, like, you deal with as a professional New York City actor. I was dealing with. And then even in the summers, I would go to there was a professional summer stock uh, company in West Virginia called West Virginia Public Theater, um, and I think they're still around. But that was a lot of. I would go there and perform as a kid, doing their summer shows, but they would have a lot of Carnegie Mellon students come and do their summer
Hmm.
stock. So I did. I remember there was one year I did Oliver with Christian Borle.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
it's one of these random things where, like,
Yeah.
now I look back in the photos and the playbills from when I was a kid, and I see these names that I'm like,
Yeah. Like you had
wow,
no
that's
idea.
amazing. No idea, no idea. Like,
Yeah.
and they are who they are, and they were,
Right.
super talented, but they were just wanting to do summer stock in college, and that was the journey, and that's what led me to
Yeah.
it. And then eventually I decided to, pursue the BFA in it, and then go from there.
Well, and it's crazy how even so many years later, remembering your first experience, because what people who don't do theater, or at least don't perform it, realize is how visceral it can be. There's so many
Mm.
memories that you're like, oh, I remember this very random detail from this show 10 years ago that was a 2-second blip in my memory. But it's so visceral that like it's crazy how it sticks with you. So growing up, in middle school, those years are hard for anyone. It's that weird change in chemistry, everything's weird. And
What are you
personally,
talking about? It's
right?
perfect for me.
Yeah, everyone thrives in middle school. Um, you know, being a young artist, I know personally being, a man who did theater wasn't the, traditional manly thing. So that brought along struggles of, oh, you don't play a sport, So did you have any struggles like that, like growing up doing theater, in Ohio? And if so, how'd you overcome those?
It's funny. I've thought about this a lot over the past, like, decade and a half, just because of how far we've grown in the country in terms of acceptance
Yeah.
with gender identities and sexualities and things like that. And I don't know whether it was where I grew up. I don't know if it was just the blend of the type of people that were in the institutions I was around, whether it was high school or middle school, um or because I was so involved socially with around theater people. But I also just think it was part of the times maybe in that area that there was obviously less labelism, which
Hmm.
right now there's a lot of labelism, which has its pros and its cons in terms of bringing people together, isolating and understanding and
Right.
compassion and empathy, but also a little bit of it can at times it can be detrimental because it puts people in their corner and then tells them no, you
Hmm.
have to, whatever. Like that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But I don't have a recollection. I mean, I have little recollections of like being teased because I was I was a singer or a dancer, more so than a
Yeah.
singer, but like a dancer. Um, and but I also like I did play soccer. Like my brother and I, we were into soccer. I played soccer, and I was too busy to play it like when as I got older in high school or even in middle school. Like I'd play it kind of
Yeah.
like summer league or whatever. Um, but like my I was not good. My brother was always really good at soccer, and then as soon as I started taking tap class, I bombed. I was awesome. Like I just remember we were playing this indoor soccer league, and I was like they couldn't figure out where to put me, and then all of a sudden, after a couple years of tap class, my foot control and agility and all that
All of a
stuff just got
sudden
so
you
much
were
better.
like the star player.
I was I look back on that and I'm kind of like I was probably whatever like 14, 15, 16. I'm like I'm Ronaldo, like this is brilliant. um but fully because of dance. But in high school I remember like I had some there was just a lot of cross there was a lot of people in band that were also the cheerleaders that were friends with the football players. There
Yeah.
were football players that were in band. There were less, for the lack of a better word, where I grew up in that time, for whatever reason, there were less boxes that people were
Yeah.
judging you on.
Right. There's a
It
lot of
was,
crossover.
and even though there wasn't necessarily, in society, it wasn't as easy to probably come out. That wasn't my experience. I wasn't discovering feelings where I felt like I had to
Hmm.
um, expose a truth about myself that I was afraid people wouldn't accept.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that it was harder for some other people, but I almost kind of feel like there was less of a pressure to have that coming out because there was just you were who
Right.
you were, and people just kind of accepted who you were, and maybe there was like a comment made like, oh yeah, well Matt he dances and stuff, but
Right.
I never felt, and my family never really felt attacked by what I did. My brother, who was not in theater and was kind of more into the sports world and whatnot, he didn't. He never. There was never any shame or there was never any like
Hmm.
weirdness about it, and it could just be because I didn't care. So I like maybe I didn't
Yeah.
see it, maybe I didn't recognize it. But I was friends with the athletes in high school, um, and and yeah, I would say that I actually started to feel more pressure and more anxiety when I got into the industry professionally.
Oh wow.
Which is funnier because I got a lot of like, oh, you think you're straight type stuff from
Yeah.
so it's like I grew up with a little bit of teasing from other males, but it was subdued because I was best friends with the high school girls that they wanted to date.
Right.
So
Right.
it was kind of like they had to be nice to Matt Simpkins because I was like the
Right.
best friend, and but a little bit of teasing from males there, and then in college it was just I mean ONU, it's such an accepting and warm environment that
Yeah.
there was never any question about it. And uh, but when I got into the industry, I faced a lot of judging and
Hmm.
and questioning for because at that time it was a lot more acceptable and people were wanting to come out and people were wanting to out other people, like it was like this trend, it was
Right.
like the soapbox at the time. So
Yeah.
people like I would get I remember my first a couple of my first few contracts like just not clicking with the kids my own age, and I was getting along better with the older generation. um because they were just a little more accepting of like me just being whoever I was and not trying to like go into a box or whatnot.
Hmm.
And I was getting a lot of getting a lot of comments or kind of like eye rolls or whatever from specifically uh, males and gay males that I wasn't who they thought I should be or they
Mm-hmm.
wanted me to be or whatever. Which is funny now because now I get the now I get a question sometimes like why do you think you work really well with or why have you worked with a lot and why do you think you work really well with with women and with females. I've worked a lot with women, whether it's in film or theater or whatnot. And I'm like, I just think like they've always just accepted me a
Right,
little bit.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
and I have some amazing male collaborators and best friends, and obviously males are a huge part of my life, and men are a huge part of my life collaboratively and
Mm-hmm.
especially. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but it was
Yeah.
weird. It's so weird, CJ, how um every generation is just such a different cultural and social experiment.
Yeah.
And the and you have to try and accept it, live in it, figure it out. And then the next generation comes along and starts to go, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And it's like
Right,
you
right.
weren't there. Like we didn't even know that was a thing. Like
Yeah.
we didn't have, we didn't have like I'm thrilled that I never had smartphones when I was in college.
Right.
Because now when I'm working with university students and I see the nightmare, and I'll call it out, I don't care, the nightmare of group chats or private
Yeah.
stories or like all that that I'm just like, this is so detrimental to
Yep.
mental health, but yet we're all preaching mental health, but yet then we flip around and we're on our phone, like,
Yeah.
making some passive aggressive comment or posting some meme that's tweeted towards somebody, like whatever. Like I'm so glad I didn't have to go through that. And some people are like, how did you go through college without a cell phone? It's like, we did. We
Yeah.
we met and we talked.
Right,
Like
right.
um yeah, so it wasn't I think I was just around a lot of the people who encouraged me and accepted me. And
Hmm.
um I think because I enjoyed it and luckily, knock on wood, I was successful at it and I
Yeah.
enjoyed it, that there was more of an acceptance and a push to be like, wow, okay, Matt, go. And this is, not to get into another little nugget of it, but the one place that I have visceral memories of actually being challenged about my choices in life was actually from church. I remember, as soon as I was starting to get older and I started talking about like, oh, I think I want to go to school for this, move to New York, there'd be comments.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other podcast. But that was one area where I actually felt like I wasn't accepted for my life
Yeah.
choices because it was, whatever labels that they wanted to put on New York or the industry or
Yeah.
actors or whatnot. But that was the only place. My family went to church every Sunday, and I was pretty active in it. Sunday school, and I did Bible quizzing for a little bit. Like, but I remember um, kind of feeling pushed out of the church a little bit just from comments that were made
Yeah.
about my life choices.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you had talked about your dance. So you had come to Ohio Northern a few times to direct some productions. I have had to rep my Adams Family merch today with you on. I have my vest.
I love it.
Um,
I love it. You're so
so
good in it.
thank you. I love that. That was a fun production to do. It was a lot, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Um,
you had a lot to do. It's never easy being never easy being a cover for
yeah.
the lead of a show. So that
Yeah,
that
but it was a fun challenge. I loved it. I loved it. And everything's a good experience. In the moment I was like, oh, like come on, I wanted this so bad. But then, on a resume it's like, but you're the understudy, so you know what you're doing. Um, so when you had come, you had taught some dance like master class. I remember doing
mm,
dance at the gym with you from West Side Story,
hmm
and you had taught that one.
hmm
And when did your dance become, and you had talked about it a little bit in your early childhood, become so part of your identity? And what was your training regimen like that shaped how you approach that in performing it, and or choreographically, that what was that training regimen like for you?
I I just took a lot of class. I really liked it on weekends after school. I knew that it was going to be an asset to me. I mean,
Hmm.
this is one of the benefits to me in my, like my 9-year old working amongst professionals, um, was that they were always giving advice to the parents and to us kids if we were interested in about kind of like, this is how the industry is, this is what we recommend. And one of the two things that a lot of them kept mentioning was like, Matt's a pretty good dancer, he's a pretty good mover even as a kid, like he should really keep that up
Yeah.
if he likes it because that's going to be a big asset. And at that time, the notion and the idea of a triple threat was like money. A lot of shows at that time that were coming out were very heavy triple threat. They weren't segregated
Right.
kind of like ensembles with your singer and your dancer ensemble. It was very much more the triple threat mentality. And the type of shows that I wanted to be doing, or that I liked, or that had young male identifying characters in it, like West Side Story and things like that, uh, those are triple threat. So it was something that I was always pushed and encouraged to embrace and focus on. And then the other thing was just like, Matt, you look so young. This is going to be amazing for you.
Yeah.
Like you're always going to work, and
Yeah.
that I would say the industry changed a little bit in that sense after I graduated. Pretty quickly after I graduated, the industry focused less on kind of like experience and age playing younger, and it was more like let's cast as young as we can because there's a rawness and a genuinity
Right.
to that. To
Right.
that, that's a whole other topic. But I think I was just encouraged, so I found a couple instructors that I loved. And just and pushed me, and I did enjoy dancing. I really enjoyed dancing. I miss dancing. um
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't know, it wasn't really, it was just something I was okay like pursuing more and more. I don't know if
Yeah.
I loved like going to the Akron School of Ballet for that training, but I knew that it was important.
Yeah.
So even at a young age, I was aware that like, no, I need to be doing this. I need to be putting on my tight white shirt and my black leotards and my
Yep.
black ballet slippers and showing up in this icy cold old church and like,
Yep.
this is old school ballet. This is like, the canes are out. Like, but like, but it was discipline. And I think that like there was a mentality for discipline back then that
Yeah.
has that just doesn't exist as much now because there's a huge attempt to make sure people aren't being abused and they're protected and they're standing up for
Right.
themselves and whatnot. And sometimes that discipline can be misinterpreted as abuse.
Yeah.
But you have to find that, seek out that self discipline to keep going to make up for, if you don't have someone
Right.
constantly pushing you, you got to be the one pushing yourself. And there
Yeah.
just must have been something in me from a younger age that just kept me going. I also just loved everything about it, CJ. It was like when I wasn't in dance class or I wasn't working on a show, I was in my basement at home building sets out of cardboard,
Yeah.
and then I was painting replicas of show posters, or
Yeah.
I was listening to songs on my cassette tapes at the time, writing out lyrics, like
Right.
just
Right.
absorbing myself in all the different avenues
Right.
of it that yeah, just kind of fed the love for it.
Yeah. So what styles of dance did you take? You had mentioned ballet and tap. Were there any others that you
I
that
mean,
you did?
yeah, I mean, there was like jazz. So
Hmm.
there was like your kind of whitewashed theater jazz um,
Hmm.
class. I did a lot of swing dancing actually. I had one of my
Okay.
best friends growing up, still a great friend. Her name's Christine, and she and I were swing dance partners, and we competed in swing dance. So we did like I did swing dance with her. I was never like the best partner at it because, as you know, I'm 5'7", so I'm like the worst type, the worst type of partner for swing dance. But like, hey, we were kids, we were in high school, it was fun. And then I did a little bit of gymnastics, but it wasn't for me. Um, but mostly tap, theater, jazz, and and then ballet. Um, yeah, kind of just stuck to
Yeah.
those three.
Yeah, the big three that everyone, such a foundation, especially
Um,
ballet. It's a foundation for a lot of other um,
well, yeah,
styles.
it's foundation for technique. I think that, looking back on it now, I wish I would have had a little more vernacular jazz experience,
Yeah.
but like, and just helping me stay low to the ground. But thankfully, thankfully when I got into college, we were doing a lot of, there's a big modern influence, as you know, at
Yeah.
ONU. So that was giving me a lot of grounded and
Right.
working on
Right.
my quads and things like that. But that's, um, and I was always, don't get me wrong, CJ. I was always a decent dancer. I could hold my own in a dance call, but I was never, when I got to New York and I was in those dance calls, I wasn't the one standing out. Like I
Right.
was blending in, which was good and probably why I booked the types of shows that I booked. But I was never
Hmm.
going to be. I was, I just there were so many boys so much better than me.
Yeah.
Like, which is fine. Like everybody's different and everybody brings something different to the table. And in some of those cases, like I would get called back to sing and then I would be the one kept because I could sing and they weren't as strong as singers
Yeah.
or whatever. Like we all have these different blends. And um so I don't know. I think one thing that I've been blessed on is for whatever reason with my upbringing and kind of where it all began for me is I never was indoctrinated into a sense of competition. That was never something that was
Hmm.
ingrained in me that I had to like embrace or be a part of. I never wanted to
Yeah.
be a part of it. I don't like it. I don't like to I really I mean I probably avoid confrontation more than I should. Um, and but I uh, competitiveness just has always been a really like toxic thing for me. So I think I just shy away from it and try and stay away from it. Like there's levels to it, but I think like toxic competitiveness. And one of the things that I say as kind of a piece of advice for people in anywhere in the kind of the arts, I mean also corporate, but like in the arts specifically
Hmm.
is don't ostracize your creative collaborations in return for a boost in your own competitive ego.
Yeah.
So when you do, I think it's so easy to be like, oh, that's that person. They do what I do. So I'm not
Yeah.
like, no, that's kind of like, that's avoiding facing possibly a truth or
Right.
something you've put in your head that's not even real. So I mean, there's a world where you could learn from that person. Maybe they could learn
Right.
something from you. Like ostracizing those creative collaborations just because it makes your own competitive ego feel better is never healthy and it doesn't really lead
Yeah.
to anywhere. So that's just one thing I say to try and avoid. But I see it happen so much where people just kind of
Yeah.
it makes them feel good to be competitive and that's just never been part of my DNA and
Hmm.
I try to avoid it. There's always going to be conflicts and there's always going to be people you enjoy working with more than others. There's always going to be that, but you should never use it to your own advantage
Right.
or what you
Right.
think you're using it to your own advantage to make yourself feel better or make yourself feel more powerful. I
Yeah.
unfortunately I see a lot of like the gatekeepers in the industry like doing that as a result of being bitter from the past.
Hmm.
They're gatekeeping or they're putting people through the ringer just because they were put through the ringer and they're bitter about it. And that's just
Yeah.
not like that's something I don't necessarily like.
Yeah. So moving to New York is a huge leap, and you kind of talked about being in a dance call and stuff like that. So how old were you when you made that transition? Was it right out of college that you had gone to New York?
Yeah, I was extremely lucky. One thing that I love about Ohio Northern and their BFA program is even over the decades since I was there and even now with you guys, they had a huge in they placed a huge importance on guest artists. Always
Yes.
have. And guest
Hmm.
artists that, can help and network in many different ways, not just
Yeah.
be like, oh, this is someone that's going to hire you for this thing once you graduate. Like,
Right.
it's not
Right.
necessarily about that. But the director of my senior show, his name was Norb Jorder. Love that man. He was directing and choreographing the Who's Tommy at Ohio Northern, which is my senior year. And I was in that, and I was his dance captain. And he just happened to be prepping for a union tour of Sound of Music. And they they needed someone that could cover Rolf and Friedrich. I don't know if they lost someone or what. So he asked if I would be interested in submitting for it. And at that, this was still kind of this was right on the cusp of like non-union tours happening. So like when you graduated, your goal was to join the union, like, because
Yeah.
that was where professional work was. There wasn't really this professional non-union circuit as
Hmm.
there is now, to embrace. So it was a union tour. So of course I auditioned and I got it. And then I had to move to New York for
Yeah.
rehearsals before commencement at
Oh,
ONU.
wow.
So I didn't even go to commencement. I was like, it was one of those things where I'm kind of like, hey, parents, so bad news. You don't get to watch me walk down the aisle for my BFA in college. But good news, I'm in New York rehearsing for a national
Right,
tour, a union
right,
national
right.
tour. I got my equity card before I got my diploma. Like, so
Yeah,
that was like, but again, it's just right place at the right time with the right person, with the right collaboration, and then me just being the right fit for what they were looking for. So
yeah,
it's just there's nothing about it, you know, like literally luck.
yeah,
and
yeah.
um and then and then that kind of got me to New York, and then I was on tour, and then I made friends, got back to the city, was subletting while I was on tour, and that's what I mean. I would have probably gone to New York as soon as a summer contract was over or whatever, and um but yeah, that's what got me there
So
here.
switching, yeah. So how long have you been there now?
That's a nice, good way to date myself, but I don't care. I moved here in uh '03, so it's been 20, was it 20, almost 23 years now. It'll be 23
Oh
years
yeah.
this spring, which is crazy to think, because it feels like my 4 years at Ohio Northern were longer than these
Right,
past 22 years. But that's, I
right,
mean, now you're out of school, you're back in it now, but like these years just fly.
right,
As soon as you leave school, they
right.
start
All of a
ticking off the
sudden
clock.
it's
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
So before we close, there are two like final things. There's always like the Tony speech of, I'd like to thank so and so. Who are those people in your life that you would like give those shout outs to that kind of helped bring you to where you are today?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, obviously my parents for
Yeah.
wanting to create a sense of community through community theater, and that's what got me into it. But Becky Summers got me into dance. Rick Hughes in middle school encouraged my love for it and encouraged
Hmm.
the school to let me leave to go do 8 shows a week. Um, those two in my early formative years were really great at pushing me and encouraging me, um, from a really young age. And then in school, at ONU, there's many people that pushed and encouraged me. Many of them
Yeah.
you still know, they're still there.
Right.
Kirsten, Brenda, Lori
Yep.
Bell, Catriona McPhee, who you don't know, she was an acting teacher at the time. She was hugely influential for me in my
Hmm.
in my acting. And Renee Dobson, who was the head of, still talk to her, I love her. She works in Philly now at a university, and I've gone to choreograph for some of her productions. About a decade ago, I was going there to choreograph a little bit. Um, Still keep in touch with her. She was she understood the industry. She had come from the industry. She was at Ava and national tour of Evita. Like, she got it. She knew it.
Yeah.
So that was a big influence. She's the one that brought in Norb Jorder that led to blah, blah, blah. But even just from I can't but not mention and give credit to the late Nils Reese, who I'm not sure if you ever got to meet in person, but I
Mm-mm.
know his name floated around while you were there. Just I don't think I would be the type of entrepreneur or artist that I am without the influence of him and his energy and his demand for quality and his
Yeah.
level of professionalism, and I learned a lot from him, even as simple as like how to travel. We traveled a lot with him,
Right.
and yeah.
Yeah. So last thing I have to kind of cap everything off. So, what would be the one thing that you would tell anyone listening to this podcast to help them stay motivated, stay
Mm,
focused on their dreams, even when the road gets tough, because this is not an easy industry to be a part of.
yeah,
So what would your kind of advice be to them to keep that motivation going?
just keep swimming. The whole artistic industry is one big giant ocean of currents that blend and fall apart and move at different
Hmm.
paces, and but it's all one ocean, and
Hmm.
it's one big place, and as long as you keep swimming and you don't kind of fall into, you know, despair and complete like rejection of the industry, as long as you keep swimming, you're going to find these currents. And the best advice I can take, because I've done it for myself, it's the reason why like I am kind of, a multi hyphenate between film and theater and photography and everything, is that cross pollination, I can't talk today, the cross pollination
Pollination.
of being a multi hyphenate is so beneficial. But that's
Yeah.
because at times there was a current that I felt was pulling me along, and I embraced it. I enjoyed it. It was warm water. It felt good. I liked, at that time, I needed that speed of it, but I always knew that that current could lead back up to another one where I
Right.
had been. And I think just accepting it from that sort of kind of cliche mentality of it
Hmm.
being one just big giant ocean with a bunch of different currents in it, it doesn't mean they're not roads that take you down
Right.
a different path and you can't get back over without backtracking. No, it's just you never know where these currents are going to go, and they
Yeah.
blend and they layer and yeah. And so
Yeah.
that's my advice. Just keep swimming, just like Dory says. It's funny. I always, when people ask me about kind of like the paths or journeys, let's say post education, post university, post
Hmm.
whatever, high school or whatever it is. I mean, the answer is like, well, it's different for everybody, and that's such a cliche. Everyone says it, but if you think
Right.
about, it's kind of like, you know, before education, before that time in your life, say high school and college, those 8 years, or let's say even 12 years, if you do a terminal degree or you do a master's program or whatever that block of time is, that's kind of where everybody's journeys kind of line up for a little bit, and then they spread off again. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like this little like funnel where you have all the spider web of people's journeys, and then they're forced through this skinny little tube called
Right.
institutional education, right? For the people that do that, there's a lot of people that don't go through that process, and that's a whole other podcast. But uh, and then once you get out of that, then it's a spiral. But I think the mental game with that, the mental trick is accepting that while you're in that tube, because it's so easy to live within that bubble of the people you're around and your experiences and the voices
Hmm.
that are being chirped at you, and and who's advising you and who you're learning from, um to assume that, you know, that kind of same playing field is still going to exist once
Yeah.
you get out, and it's the reverse of like what happened before, and then it all joins up, but it still spirals out. So
Hmm.
what you're tapping into is really nice, that kind of like that beginning journey, because it informs the way you think about things. It informs the
Yeah.
way you, obviously the way that you react to people, or you communicate and you collaborate, and because it's all learned environment. So
Right. Right.
this is great, CJ. Thank you
Yeah.
so
I
much for
truly
having
can't
me
thank
on.
you enough. Is there anything you would like to plug, like any projects you're working on before we go?
No, just I'm working on a bunch of stuff. Nothing necessarily to plug.
Yeah.
My website's mattsimkins.net. That kind of
Amazing
has what's
photographer,
going on.
amazing
Thank you.
headshots.
Thank you. Thank
So
you. Thank you. Yeah.
talented.
I appreciate this,
Yeah.
CJ. Take
Yeah.
care.
I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for doing this.
Of course. I'll talk to you soon.
See
Bye.
ya. You guys, it was so wonderful getting to talk to Matt today. I loved getting to catch up with him and hear all about his story, where he got his start, what made him fall in love with theater. It's so cool to hear all these different stories. Go follow him on Instagram at Matt Simpkins _NYC And his headshot Instagram is Matt Simpkins Photography. So if you're in the New York area and you need to get your headshots done, go to Matt. He is so wonderful. He has a great studio. He's such a great person to work with. He really, really knows what he's doing when it comes to theater headshots specifically. I loved getting to work with him to get my headshots done. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. Please tune in next time for our next episode because it is going to be so much fun. I'm so excited. So tune in to find out where it all began.